doing the right thing
Keep up with it.
for legal's watching.
Yeah.
Attention over here. Thank you all for being here. This is the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee's Solid Waste Subcommittee. And I appreciate everyone who is here to talk about a topic that nobody pays attention to until it gets complicated, and then all of a sudden people care deeply. So I would like to thank the folks that have come to this serving on the subcommittee. It is open to anybody, and if you didn't make the first meeting, jump in when you can. So we're glad to have you here. I have a few extra things that I would like to throw into the agenda, but we're going to mostly follow the agenda that's there. So I want to accomplish a couple of things. One is for us to sort of get big picture, which consists of two parts, sort of what are all the things that tie in with solid waste and the issues that we look at. And then two, Jen Harmon does a fantastic job of explaining the solid waste master plan, which was put in place was accepted by the previous council. So many of you here have not had that explained to you. Solid waste and the issues that we look at, and then
we're live. Looks like the streaming is working.
Just checking to make sure it's working.
That's good, and it is. So glad. So we're going to ask her to give a brief presentation of that, very brief, which is great. And then I would love for us to kind of circle back around and say what do we have the capacity to try to accomplish in the upcoming year or so. I mean, my hope is that this will continue for a while, so we don't necessarily give up in despair if we don't get it all done in a year. But let's try to pick some reasonable tasks. So that being said, I will just articulate the things that came to my mind, and then I would welcome additions of other things that I'm not thinking about, so that we can just start with saying, yes, we know we've got all the right things in front of us as we decide what to do. So as we've talked with each other about what people care about, the number one thing that pops up is dependable pickup of garbage above and all else, and recycling beyond that. The city doesn't pick up recycling everywhere, but when things don't get picked up, we hear about it. Within the topic of recycling, I would love to have this group talk some about just more information that we can give to our constituents about where it goes and how much really is collected and things like that. So I've labeled that as transparency, not that I think anybody's trying to hide anything, but I think more information will have our constituents buy into it better. I think that's really important. And I would love to see us increase what we're in recycling. That's part of our goal. And then within sort of the traditional recycling, plastics, paper, and all that, there's a whole nother side of recycling, which is the C&D, construction and demolition, that we, again, when we get to the zero waste master plan, it'll become clear why that needs to be a focus. I realize that some of y'all hear more just about the mundane things, like either my garbage didn't get picked up or somebody is dumping in a hill in my district, down into a valley, and I'm mad about it. And how do we fix that? Yeah, we hear that one. And then another piece of the big picture is food and organic waste, and how do we expand the compost pilot that is going gangbusters right now, and that could be another fun report that we get out of Ms. Harmon there. And then just what is our interaction with the region and the state? We will learn that the Greater Nashville Regional Council spends a lot of time talking about solid waste and trying to look at it from a regional perspective. So I would love for this group to figure out a process for connecting with those other entities, like the Solid Waste Region Board, which meets here monthly, and it would be great if one of us would attend that and report back to the group, as well as the Regional Council, which is a different entity. So I just blitzed through all the things that I'm thinking about with regard to solid waste, and I would welcome additions to that list if I have left stuff off. So I will open the floor to those of y'all who've generously come. Yes, sir.
I would say the landfill question.
Good.
I know the Rutherford County one is going to end fairly soon. What's next? Rather than it just creeping up on us, start trying to figure out how we do it or what company would be good to look at. I know they've all studied it.
Yeah,
No
and
way
I'm
they
sure
haven't.
people in this room have studied it. So having us learn what y'all already know, or as much as you think we can absorb would be, that's a great one. Other thoughts? All right, so have we defined the topics we care about?
Under increase, does that also include like the technology and whatnot to increase what we can recycle and not just increasing the number of people who recycle?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, good point. That's a great one. That's a great
Because I
one.
think that's going to be the big thing is making sure that the technology that we know is out there is being brought into Metro so that we can start recycling all plastic, so we can start recycling more things. I like what we heard last time about at the recycling centers, repurposing and refurbishing electronics and furniture that could then be given to, utilized by OHS and social services for those who are in need of TVs and whatnot.
Right. And there are models in other cities of, not recycling centers, not a big enough word, but reuse centers, where you can come in and swap stuff like that. So so not just quantities, but materials and other things like that. That's great.
And facilities.
Okay. Great. Anything else? All right, so we'll sort of add that. So hold all those things in your mind in terms of if we're going to either work on legislation, support our new waste services department, which we're excited about having, or whatever, how when we sort of come back to this and figure out what the current topics that we're going to apply are, we'll come back to that. So let me take a deep breath and I'd love to acknowledge the people that are here because not everybody's going to get a chance to officially speak. So let's just start over here with Mr. John Honeysucker, who has been our liaison through many different iterations, and we appreciate the continuity, and Miss Mary Peoples, who has jumped into that, and Director Margaret Darby, who keeps track of everything you're supposed to be doing. Jen Harmon, we're going to hear from. Director Thurman, we're going to hear from, and hopefully y'all all know Tiffany Wilmot, who is the garbage queen from years back. So it's been one of my go-tos. Quite a compliment, anyway. She has been my resource person on all things recycling, waste reduction, and all those types of things. So I'm excited to have a wealth of expertise in the room. So with that being said, Jen, if we can bring you up just to kind of give us the quick recap of the Zero Waste Master Plan. And Margaret, thank you for getting that work done.
I'm hopeful that they're going to be able to just start showing it, so.
I see it. We see it.
They said that they're working on whether or not it's going to show up on the
Gotcha.
the broadcast.
Okay.
Does this subcommittee have like a web page or someplace we could, just in case it doesn't get broadcast, we could put the PDF on?
Yeah, we'll have there should be a portion on the council resources page under Transportation Infrastructure Committee.
Excellent. So just for folks listening, if you're not able to see the presentation, we'll make sure it gets online.
Good. Great.
All right. So first to start off with the solid waste master plan. Ultimately, this plan is a state mandated plan that's regulated through TDEC, the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. So state code requires that solid waste regions, and Davidson County is its own solid waste region, to have a 10-year solid waste management plan. And that plan is intended to meet statewide per capita diversion goals for each solid waste region, which I will note, we have achieved that goal year over year as we've been doing this. The Davidson County Solid Waste Region Board is required then on an annual basis to review their plan and then also approve that plan and an annual progress report. I will note it's on the calendar year, not the fiscal year. And staff at Metro Waste Services, as the county, we are the staff for the Solid Waste Region Board, so we put that annual progress report together and get that information to the state for approval.
And we can see that on the Waste Services website, right?
Yes.
I keep stumbling across it.
Yes, there is. So through the Waste Services website, you can get to it, but also the Solid Waste Region Board has its own webpage where you can go back and look at all previous board meetings, and each board meeting will have the, if there was a video of the meeting, it'll have that, as well as presentation materials, agenda, and the annual report is posted online every year. And the board is comprised of appointees from both Metro Nashville as well as all of our satellite cities as well, since it is a regional county board. So that's the purpose of the plan, kind of ultimately on a high level. In terms of developing our most recent solid waste master plan, that was a process that was started in 2017 with a lot of research as well as a waste characterization study that I'll mention in a couple slides. But ultimately, that research, we looked at local programs, the initiative, the infrastructure that we have, as well as initiatives that are going on across the country to look at how we could dramatically increase diversion of our waste due to the landfill capacity issues that we do have here in Davidson County and Middle Tennessee. So it started in 2017. In 2018, we did some extensive stakeholder engagement. There were 6 public meetings. There were multiple rounds of online surveys that went out. There was also Metro Council engagement to build out what we wanted based on a lot of that research and what the public wanted in terms of waste management. So then in 2019, the plan was drafted and it was approved by the Solid Waste Region Board in December of 2019. So already that's before COVID, if we all remember. So a lot has changed since then. And so in 2020, this was approved. So after it goes to the board, it goes to TDEC, where TDEC also approves it. That happened in early 2020. And then it was approved by Metro Council in 2021. So in a nutshell, these are the goals and priorities of the solid waste master plan. The main goal is really diversion. It's 90% diversion from landfill. How can we reduce, reuse, recycle, compost more so that we are not using up the very limited landfill capacity that we have? So that's 90% diversion is what we define zero waste as. And it really incorporated these 3 top kind of goals or priorities, and that's increasing recycling, food waste reduction and recovery, and composting. It also focused on adopting recycling and recovery of construction and demolition waste, and also strengthening public education programs as well around all of our waste streams here in Nashville and Davidson County. So this is the waste characterization study, or a snapshot of the waste characterization study that was done in 2017. We looked at waste, we had the fun, I unfortunately didn't get to participate, but some fun people got to dig through by hand trash to see what kind of materials we're actually throwing away. So sorting it out between all these different categories of materials. We only did this study on municipal solid waste. That's an important kind of note to make, that there is municipal solid waste landfills. That's where your household garbage goes. But for example, construction and demolition waste can go to a municipal solid waste landfill, but it can also go to a construction and demolition landfill. So this is only those municipal solid waste landfills that are the most regulated, where the majority of our waste goes.
This is by volume?
Yes. Or wait,
Is it volume
by
or
tonnage.
weight? Tonnage.
Yes, by tonnage, by weight, excuse me, thank you. So you can see really right off the bat, and this is the overall picture. We did look at it seasonally. We also looked at residential versus commercial, but in a nutshell, this is the whole pie, and the pieces of the pie that are glaring are the paper. That's infrastructure that we do have for recycling for paper. That's a huge opportunity. But we also have almost half of that pie is organic material. That's both food and yard waste. I will note that NDOT manages brush collection and yard waste. So we do some food waste, which I can answer questions about, but that organics does include both. The next largest piece of the pie is plastic. Plastic is pretty complicated though. Here we can only accept bottles, jars, and jugs. I'm sure many of you have heard me say that, but really just number 1s and number 2s of those plastic materials. So even though that's 16.4%, you have to take into account what can be recycled within that currently in our landscape and within the infrastructure that we have. And then construction and demolition, so there is a pretty big chunk, 12.2% of construction. C&D represents construction and demolition waste, so that's a pretty large chunk, and that's all going to those municipal solid waste landfills. From just anecdotal conversations that I've had, this number is very likely significantly more construction waste is going to municipal solid waste landfills than what was going there in 2017, as those construction and demolition landfills have also filled up and are nearing capacity. So you've got 12.2% in the municipal solid waste or MSW landfills, and then you've got these whole other landfills that are getting a lot of this waste. So you can see from this, there's some very clear target areas by this characterization study of waste streams that we have opportunity and potential for diversion. And so that's where we really focused and where the plan has focused when it was drafted in 2019. So lastly, I just wanted to cover our infrastructure and what we have. As the Nashville Department of Waste Services, we have 4 convenience centers where all residents in Davidson County can go. We do recycling of your household, your regular household recyclables, electronics, tires, scrap metal, mattresses, and food waste all can be recycled at those convenience centers. We do take household garbage as well as bulky trash items and have proper disposal for household hazardous waste. We have 7 recycling drop-off sites in addition to those 4 convenience centers. Those convenience centers are staffed to make sure everything is going in the right place. Those drop-off sites are partnered with host sites that help host those for us, and we do the collection and are unstaffed. And then we have our curbside collection programs. That's only on the map. It's the kind of ugly grayish color that you see there. Is the Urban Services District is where we have our curbside collection. So we have a little over 144,000 trash customers and a little over 112,000 recycling customers. And then in terms of food waste, we do have our pilot curbside food scraps collection program. So that's food waste only, that's not yard waste. But we have 731 households that are participating in that program. And we've collected over 277,000 pounds of food waste from that program. So that's been a really exciting kind of new addition to the services that we provide. And then we also do a little bit of businesses downtown. We do some dumpster collection and some public litter baskets. But I will note that NDOT does street litter, and I mentioned brush. There was one other thing that I thought I had, but I don't have it on my list. Yes, but they do street litter, illegal dumping. So those are all things that are managed by NDOT versus the Nashville Department of Waste Services. But I think the most important thing to notice from all of this is that while we provide a lot of services to the residents, Metro does not own any of the infrastructure that we use for disposal or for recycling. So our disposal contract is with Republic Services. They do send, it's with the transfer station, it's not with the landfill. So it goes to their transfer station and then they take it out to Murfreesboro currently. And then our recycling contract is with WM, Waste Management, now known as WM, and they have some infrastructure that's available to us for recycling, but as already been noted, we can only take a small amount of plastics. We also can't take glass curbside in that program either due to the equipment that they currently have at that facility. So that, in a nutshell, is an overview of the plan and kind of where we are, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm sure Tracy would love to answer any questions.
That was impressive, good job. Questions?
So the sorry, Chair.
I didn't.
Oh. So the recycling plants, like when we pay them to take everything, like the disposable Republic Services, they take all our stuff, and just like the recycling, we pay them to take our recycles?
Yes,
Yes.
processing.
It's sort of a partnership in theory. There was a time when we shared profits, but then there were no profits after the China thing.
Yeah, it's in there in the contract, but again, it can be a diminishing return, because they kind of go through, like, what is it, an annual check on residuals to see what that is, Jen, because you participated in that part.
Yeah.
But the cost is significantly higher than your just landfill disposal cost.
Okay.
And let me just remind people, I will try to acknowledge council members by name and other folks, but if you speak, if you'll say who you are, because people who are watching won't always know
Okay.
who they're hearing from, so I need to remind people to do that, and y'all remind me to do that as well. That's a good question. One more and then Councilmember Bailey.
My next question is the food. So what do you do with the food? I mean, where do we, when you say, I mean, you're turning it into compost, do we do that locally, or is that still one of these things that we send?
So that is done, we have a contract with Compost Company, as well as Compost Nashville. Compost Nashville is a hauler, Compost Company is a hauler as well as a processor, so they take, they're out in Ashland City, so they take all of the material, compostable material, they turn it into compost, and then they send that out to local farmers, gardeners, landscapers. You can also buy it in bags at local landscape places as
Is
well.
that the National Compost Company that you see
Yes.
advertised everywhere?
Compost
Okay.
Company, yep.
Okay.
And she
Yeah,
can
so
arrange-
it's super
She can arrange a
hyper-local.
tour for you if you want.
I'd be happy to, yes.
It's really interesting. Great question. Councilmember
I didn't
Sleep.
have one. I'm still just kind of digesting the whole thing.
Okay.
I have one, Chair.
Lots to do. Councilmember Bradford.
So is there any master planning or future planning going on as to how to grow? You know, we've heard a lot from constituents about how the convenience centers are not convenient. When you look at that map, it's pretty much kind of the east side of the county. Like, if you live out on the west side of the county, you have no access to convenience centers. Increasing those, increasing drop-off locations so that the drop-off locations are more convenient for individuals. Looking into facilities, like what do our facilities need to look like for us to increase recycling? Is it feasible when you look at, we are paying other people to do it? Has there been research into, well, what would it take for Metro to do everything ourselves and get rid of that middleman?
I'm gonna, yeah.
Director Thurman?
Well, I think a lot of that is, I guess, the decision and the commitment by this council and the administration to kind of develop a department and kind of go in that direction. You know, the priorities from your plan have not changed. I mean, the priorities are pretty consistent. And, you know, even your waste characterization, that's in 2017. That's something I was talking to Jen about. I think that's something I would like to do now in our current budget year to kind of get one of those going to see where we are right now in our waste stream, because that's always indicative of what's going on and what's being processed. It kind of helps inform, you know, some of your planning. But as a whole, I think just in looking in terms of going into this budget process, you know, we're developing the standalone department and you're developing all the things there that should be robust. Those are some of the things that when you're talking about that, coming from a program where we went A to Z and covered it all, on the same dollar amount and the same customer base basically that you all have, it's doable. And, you know, and that's the thing. So I probably have spent more time on the collection side right now, just, you know, fine tuning the operation, and that's going to continue to be the thing. Part of that, though, your convenience centers and looking at that, one of the things that I agree with you as far as how things are spread out, and how do we make it accessible for everybody and make it user-friendly. You know, my first blush of those, they're not very user-friendly. So I think that's the other thing that I'm trying to bring to the table is a safety culture, not just internally but externally as well, so that they look very user-friendly, that people aren't afraid to be there, and that you know, when they drop something off, that they feel like they can physically do that. I think our locations are a little challenging on that end. So that's one of the things that I've been looking at. I know that we already have the capital direction going on that on Buzzard Hollow that's out in the Bellevue area. That is pretty exciting. It's pretty exciting that will be one of the newer convenience center locations, because it's basically a repurposed landfill I know that that is going through council right now as far as the portions of the property, and so getting that developed out. So that's something you all kind of committed to before, and you're going down the process of developing that piece. It's big enough that, you know, you could do a convenience center, have an education center in there, you know, to do either composting workshops or bring in schools. It just has lots of potential to that. But as a whole, in looking at all your convenience centers, I'm wanting to kind of dig down into that more to see like what is the customer count at each one of those. Because, you know, those things can run cyclical, you know, so that certain times of the year, some of them may be more busy than others. And then just what types of material are we seeing at each one of those? That's what I'd like to dig into a little bit more. You are maintaining household hazardous waste standalone facilities, I guess, within those at two different locations. And, you know, typically you would see more event type things on those kind of things. And that's something that Jen and I have talked about as far in terms of outreach, that we kind of engage more in some customer outreach, and residents can, like, maybe you have a free HHW week, or, you know, just where they can drop things off. And I know we talked about the electronic waste. From where I came from in Lexington, Kentucky, we had an electronics waste facility. So we were accepting the electronic waste, you know, so to even defray from our cost of shipping that, because we had contracts for shipping that to recycling that material, we repurposed with the 501c3 programming, and we were able to divert a lot of usable things. We've got the ability to do that in some of our centers now, just because there's a place to bring them inside. And we kind of talked about kind of maybe looking at that in terms of Super Bowl, because you see a lot of people that will take a TV and they throw out a good TV and then they bring in the big TV. And so those are things that, like, somebody that's just, you know, maybe they need help in setting up a household, again, for whatever reason, in our 501c3s, those are opportunities, I think, for us to repurpose that, and then we actually defray our costs, because it's not something that we're shipping out to.
That sounds great. Thanks for all that context. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you. I was wondering about when we looked at the pie chart that showed the composition of the 2017 municipal solid waste stream, where along the chain is that C&D coming from? Because it's not supposed to be residential customers, right? You're not supposed to put any C&D in your can.
Correct. So this is both commercial and residential waste. I do have a QR code at the end. I can pull that up. That takes you to the Zero Waste Master Plan, and you'll see in the Zero Waste Master Plan there are multiple breakdowns between residential and commercial waste. But just because you're not supposed to put C in construction and demolition in your can doesn't mean it doesn't end up there. But this is a combination of both of those sectors.
And does that figure include, like, C&D collected at Alejandro, like the truck bed fulls that we take there?
Yes.
Okay, so it does include Alejandro.
Yes, this
Okay,
would
cool.
include coming from, so this was done at one of our transfer stations, or at the transfer station that we contract with. So they checked what trucks are coming in, so it was looked at versus our trucks and others. So it incorporated a smattering of all of that.
Great, I'll look for that bigger breakdown.
And I'll pull that up just.
And I had some other questions, but I'll save them for the current topics
Okay,
section.
which we'll get to.
But just briefly on food composting with 731 customers, is that something that, is it limited to a geographic area? Are folks able to sign up for that right now? What is the status of that for just like the customer facing aspect?
So the food scraps pickup pilot was funded originally by a donation for a 1-year pilot. We've been able to, and it was for 750 households. So we had 750 households for 1 year. That first year ended in October, but we received funding from the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation and Organics Management Grant that gave us some additional funding to be able to continue through this fiscal year. So right now, folks can't sign up for it because it's not a full-off program, but that's part of the work that we're going to be evaluating on what are the next steps for that program to expand it.
And the pilot was initially just for people in the USD.
Oh, yes, so, thank you. It is only folks that have our current curbside services, but they are not just in one geographic location. There are participants from every council district that's within the USD. So it's pretty broad, and we really tried to make sure that we were meeting census data in terms of our participants, so that the participants looked like our Nashville community.
Great.
And people can contract privately with Compost Nashville if they.
Absolutely, and they can also go to any one of our 4 convenience centers. We do have drop-off composting at no additional charge,
Free, that's great.
for free.
Great. Okay, that is fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been very, very helpful. So with that, I want to move on to sort of current topics. I would love for us to, with input from the experts in the room, get a feel for what can we as council members do to facilitate this process moving forward? How can we be supportive? Obviously, the budget is coming up, so ask for whatever you want, and we'll be your cheerleaders. Or, help us know why that's important, and we'll help advocate for those things, as well as capital spending plans along the way. But I would love to see us, be actively and proactively engaged, rather than just, as I said at our other meeting, contracts are long and expensive and complicated, and if they come to us as, in the typical fashion where we have 5 days to look at them, it is just really hard to get that. So if we as a group can be on the inside scoop and just have the ability to understand that, then that may help, for us to, at the time that we have with our cohorts on the council floor, be able to say, we can explain that to you or whatever. So we would love to be able to, help extend the reach and the knowledge of the department in that way if we can. And then also, I think, just to reflect back to y'all what is important from our constituent standpoints of, you've got a million things that you would love to fix, and if it's at all useful to have us say, well, here's what we're hearing is top of mind for 35 districts. That may be useful to you. It may just drive you crazy because you know what you need to do. But I think that's our job as council representatives. So I will just say there are 3 topics listed here because that's what comes to my mind. So again, I'm just starting the conversation, and then I would welcome other thoughts. So my understanding is that we are close to the end of both which landfill we're taking things to, which was the question that you asked. So, it would be great for us to sort of have and maybe that's our topic at our next meeting, perhaps, is, what's a healthy timeline for figuring out where, when one contract ends, what the next one looks like. And I'm guessing, just what I know about our landfill options, we are not on a healthy timeline. So
No, we're not.
what do you do when you're not? What do you do when the county next door is tired of taking your garbage and all that? And the short answer is we learn how to reduce our waste and try to deal with it in many other ways. But we've got to be thoughtful about that. And in addition to what are our landfill options? What are the waste hauling options? When? How fast is that coming up? And are there priorities? I mean, I hear from my neighbors that closing the lids on the garbage cans is a big deal, and Sharon Smith, bless her heart, has been fantastic at trying to deal with those concerns. But it's currently not in our contract. We don't tell them they need to, and they're working hard to get all their houses in by the end of the day. So, as we're looking at the new contract, we would just love to be able to, again, to put the information that's important to us in front of you, so that we can have influence on that. And then the recycling processing contract will end at some point, and I know I love the way I've seen some other cities do it, that I would love to at least have that discussion, and other people may have other things that you want to do. And then those are kind of my two favorite things. So are there other topics this group really has burning desires?
I'm general services, so
Yeah, okay, so.
less applicable on some of these things, but definitely looking for a long-term approach and finding a way to secure a landfill and at the same time reduce what we can to get where that will last, as long as it can. But I know we're running out of time. to come up with a longer, more permanent solution. And I'd rather try to get on the front end of that rather than just wait for panic mode. I think John's got it all worked out, though.
That's right. He's probably dealt with it. Well, and again, I think as we learn more about what the Greater Regional Council is doing and the Solid Waste Region Board,
Yes.
there is a move nationally to look at this as a regional solution. And if we're looking at it regionally, then Urban Services General Services District becomes less of an issue. Maybe we can solve this in a countywide way.
Yeah, it's all gonna go someplace.
It's all gonna go someplace, and it may work better if we all treat it the same way, so I think we need to think outside the box of it's always gotta stay two separate, ways to be dealt with.
Yeah.
So, and again, if you wanna look at the.
Yeah, I see it as one problem.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's picked up by the company that does it, that I pay, or whether you guys pick it up, they're going to the same place.
Right.
The same stuff is happening for all of it. So
Exactly.
how we fix that, and, again, regionally, we're not gonna be alone. Murfreesboro, if they close theirs down, it's gonna be looking for a place.
Yep.
I know there are other counties that use the same facilities that we all do, and how do we manage that? Is it that we ship it somewhere else in a regional tone where it goes to some city far away, or is it something more geographically close to where we are now?
Right, but not in my district, right?
Chair,
Yeah, yes, Mr. Bradford.
two questions. First one, when we look at the waste, I know other countries, especially in Scandinavia, they utilize incineration. Has the technology improved to the point where incineration is not as polluted as it was 20, 30 years ago when it used to be what we did? Like, could that be another option for some of our waste? The other one question I have is for the chair. The current topics, are these kind of what has been identified as that low-hanging fruit for this year, or are we still trying to determine what that is? As we spoke at the last meeting.
Yeah, these are just, like I said, these are the things that are most important to me. So I'm trying to work really hard not to forget about everybody else's concerns. So I don't know that those are necessarily low-hanging fruit, but I think they're super important. And I think they're close to imminent, and that if we don't pay attention to them, those decisions will be made without us either having the opportunity to learn about them or to have input on them.
What?
But if you have low-hanging fruit, then.
Oh, I'd say
let's put it in there.
one good one is, and came up in this conversation, the food program.
Yeah.
Unless we can find money to sustain it or even grow it, it'll probably end this year. So as we're in the budget process, maybe we need to find out from Waste Services, how much would it cost to keep it running as is, and how much would it cost to expand it? I don't know if you want to set by 20%, 25%, or countywide, because if we know those figures, then we know what we can try to ask for in the budget process. Any other capital needs that can help increase diversion. I think those would be two low-hanging fruits that we could try to work on this year, get those in.
That's a great one.
Because looking at that pie, half of that stuff is paper and organics. Both can be composted and recycled. If we can figure out a way to divert that, that's half of our trash.
That's a great point. Very good, very good. And I would say, I'll say one thing that can be, one of the things I had talked about was transparency. I think there are some people who say, well, I would recycle, except I just don't believe it's really going anywhere. And so having a better mechanism for communicating to people, this is where it goes and here's what happens to it. We have, in our contract, it says, that they have to tell us, they don't, how much goes where and what it gets processed into. I would love to see that happen. I'm not sure if that's something we can make happen under the current contract, or if the next contract is so close that that's something that we could have in place in the next year or two. But to me, I think that's really important. And as I said, Ms. Harmon can set us up for some tours of the things that are happening locally, which is really interesting. I've learned a ton just following you around. So seeing what happens at the compost company, I think is great. I would also love to see the paper recycling places, because that to me, I mean, that's the biggest chunk of our waste, and I just would love to know what they're doing with it.
The facility out there near Omohundro, I did a tour of that a few months
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah, exactly right,
That's
yeah,
great.
the waste process, I mean, the recycling processing facility, that's also a great tour. Yeah, so if y'all can help educate us on that, that would be great. Councilmember Parker.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts kind of on the waste side, just looking ahead to, I'm not sure when those contracts are up, but I've been kind of a broken record with a lot of folks. You've heard me talk about this for a long time, but getting some kind of notification process for when a bin is rejected. So when we were having a lot of issues,
Recycling,
both trash and recycling.
the recycle trash.
But when we were having a lot of pickup inconsistencies in my district, I was getting reached out to a lot, and sometimes it was a miss and there was an operational issue that we had to sort out, and we were able to do that. But other times I would go by and look, and it's like somebody's got old pieces of lumber sticking out of their recycling bin, and that's never going to get picked up. And so if folks are just on the customer side thinking, well, they're just not getting me, but there's no feedback process to say, hey, you can't stick lumber in your recycling, or you have to bag your trash, or you can't bag your recycling. If there's not some kind of feedback, people just think they're being missed. And it has gotten better, but the other issue with just the notification on the recycling side is, we have alleys in my area. And so a lot of the kind of repeat offenders with recycling bins, they just become kind of a stagnant, the lid gets open enough that the wind blows it off eventually, and then it's just this totem of old pieces of lumber and garbage sticking up, and then in the summer it fills with water, and there's mosquitoes, so I'm going up and down the alley dumping the water out, and if they're empty I'll flip them upside down so they don't carry water, and it's just, I feel like with the recycling there has to be a point where we document and we say, hey, we're going to revoke your can because we've told you however many times we deem fair that you can't just leave this mosquito nest full of non-recyclable stuff in the alley, and on the 31st of the month we're coming by and we're going to revoke it, and then I don't know how you get it back, like a driving penalty class where you have to go online and
Picking up litter.
talk about it. Yeah. But I'm sure there's some way to get it back. But or if a new renter comes in and they can demonstrate if they've got a fresh lease, say, okay, well and you agree that you know how to recycle. I don't know what it would look like, but something has to be done to get these, because some folks have 3 of them, and they just get full and they just stay stagnant. And part of when I was kind of bringing this up a lot, I guess it was 2 years ago that this was kind of really becoming an issue. It was whenever the Red River and the reshuffling happened. One of the concerns with the contractors that were doing the waste pickup in my neighborhood after the Red River reshuffling was that we didn't have that requirement in the contracts. And so just any time that we're looking at renewing any of these contracts with people, even if we're not ready to operationalize that across the system, putting it in the contract that, hey, when we say notice is required, y'all have to start giving notice for, I don't know if we call it refused or whatever we call the term, when they look and they say, no, we're not taking this. Just having an explanation of that and some kind of escalation to say, you can't just let it sit there forever on both the recycling and solid waste side. And most of the residential collection is for recycling is Metro, so that might be a good place to kind of initially roll that out. And also, I imagine it would help with our contamination rates. Although I imagine our Metro folks are pretty good about not picking up really, really bad recycling. I can tell because my alley is full of these cans, stagnant water and everything. So that's kind of my operational thing. And then, we had under current topics our new recycling processing contract. And I would love to get a sense of what is the like, should we be considering a capital investment in a public facility? Because my thinking is if we're gonna RFP it out and there's one game in town, you know, how would we induce them to make the capital investments to be able to do other kinds of plastics and maybe do glass and these other things? Because they're just gonna look at that and say, well, we're the only guy in town, we'll just wait for that RFP to expire and you'll give us one that you know will fit us without us having to spend a bunch of money. So, you know, do we need to be planning ahead for building a facility rather than trying to induce the private sector to build the right facility? Just I don't know when that processing contract is up, but I imagine it's going to involve either capital investment from the private sector or the public sector to get us where we want to be. So, like, getting that figured out as soon as possible would, I think, be wise. And the way that the director is nodding, they've thought about it extensively already, and I would just love to get caught up to speed there.
Great, good thoughts, All right.
I can say something to that.
Yes, Director
The
Thurman?
chair will
So,
Sure.
abide.
you're
Thank you.
exactly on point, and I think we had an earlier conversation a month or 2 months ago when I first got here. So that's part of standing up the department, because that was a glaring thing that's missing, is like in terms of just a departmental structure, you don't have that enforcement compliance piece. That's something that I had at least 3, of the compliance officers, and also had a supervisor over that. So they were going out and actually issuing out fines of people that were violators that it happened repeatedly, or the most common thing a lot of people will complain about is people that just leave the container on the curb and then let it go indefinitely and never bring it back in. There's actually an ordinance, but we don't have that wrapped up in like the current structure. And so that fee piece is not there either. I mean, ours was minimal in Lexington, it was like $25, but also even closing that loop, as far as like we were giving out these extra containers. I know what we found, especially during COVID, it wasn't in our recycling containers, but we also handled yard waste, so we had a yard waste container. That predominantly was, extra food containers and everything else during COVID. So there was lots of contamination we saw on that side. I will say one time when I worked at the back of the truck, I went out and like you would have these multifamily areas and they were taking that recycling container and using it to valet over to a dumpster, or they were just contaminating on that. So you've kind of hit on some things as we talk about standing up this department. And then the request for positions, that's some area that I'm kind of looking at requesting, because that's a section that's glaringly missing and that's needed, because it doesn't do you any good to send a letter out without anything else behind it, because what are they going to do? And you can just keep tagging oops, but with nothing. And so I think that's a big piece. In terms of your recycling contract, I thought, oh, well, that'll be like low-hanging fruit, because, you've got your convenience centers that have that source separated material, so then we can just broker some of that material. There's some things in there that are pretty easy kind of pieces to broker yourself. So that your current contract says that they're the sole exclusive person when it comes to recycling. And so that's the thing of getting a good review on that and winding that piece. I think that's pretty important. I think you can start incrementally getting there. But typically when it comes to the industry as a whole, you don't see, private industry is not gonna build it and they will come. It's really, that becomes the impetus for a government where we say, okay, we're gonna take a stand on this and we're gonna stand this up. You've got 26,000 tons, a little bit over, in recycling every year. I mean, that's enough to get you started in a recycling processing of some kind. I know that was.
When you say 26, are you talking about from the convenience centers?
All, yeah,
All,
your
thank you.
curbside, yes, all. And so, and when you're looking at that, there's that incremental build out. And so, I know that Director Potter in water, he had a section of, it was like 0.93 as far as acreage that he had kind of carved out, and thinking in terms of the downtown. But we were thinking, that maybe that's an opportunity to kind of start there, I know they were pretty successful in like doing some bids with some folks, because they're trying to get things going. So I know everybody is committed to recycling. I would love to see us where we're every week. Because what we kind of figured out in Lexington, Kentucky, is that even though we had kind of built our fee structures and everything around, just waste collection, we have kind of figured out through Chinese sword that it's assumed people are, it's a natural thing that people assume recycling with your waste. So you get both containers when you sign up in Lexington. So you'd like to see that here. I think for me, when I came into this, I was thinking, I knew the capacity issues. I didn't necessarily realize all the infrastructure pieces on the recycling side, so that's kind of glaring. And I probably didn't realize I recycled as much. That's a common thing I kind of laughed about with Jen, because recycling is all over my house right now. You're trying to figure out, but the processing and get rid of it. And I was used to being able to have more readily opportunities in Kentucky on that. So those are things I'm looking at in terms of service and trying to grow that and bring that here, because it's needed.
Thank you.
Great.
Any thoughts on timeline, what we attack next, and how we can provide help? And when can we get our tour set up? Councilman
Sorry,
Moore.
I apologize. I had something else already set up, but I wanted to be here. So earlier we were speaking that our contract runs out in 2 years.
Which contract?
The waste,
Waste hauling?
both, the disposed, both of them, right? Correct, in 2027? So let's just say, so they say, okay, we're not having no more contract with you. What happens at that point? Because you can't build you can't build a landfill in 2 years. Even if today we made that decision, you can't build a landfill. So tell me what you're thinking. What are your thoughts on what we should be doing as a city, knowing that those contracts run out in 2 years?
Well, first of all, I think the big thing is like the fact that you don't have the infrastructure. And so some of the requests coming forward in my capital will be like requesting infrastructure, because I was kind of shocked about that. You want to hold some piece of that. You don't, in a city this large, you can't service everything, but you want to hold a piece of what you're doing, so that like you don't get into a situation like Red River where you're just kind of like you don't have any options. And so one of the things that we did, albeit I could have thought probably better about the timing, because I wasn't thinking about the timing about the December when everything happened before, but the platform routes came up for bid in November.
And remind us, Platform is a company.
Platform, yes, and they were what had formerly been Red River. And so that was about 39,000 households.
Is that who was picking up our trash?
Yes, in that sector, yes. And so those 39,000 households came up for bid in November. And already just, coming in September, I realized that on your routes, you weren't necessarily optimized on recycling. And so after we combined those, then you had about 18 more drivers that you could do that service with. And so we took those on. Now, I will say that the maps and some of those things challenged us for a little bit. Technology is something that we're trying to infuse into what we're doing. And what I've kind of figured out in the operation is some of that is like right now, I think we need some sequencing going on, because we typically in Lexington gave the driver the route to drive, and we told them how to drive it from the technology standpoint. So it wasn't up for grabs. They would process it a certain way. That got to the efficiency. So that's kind of what we're working towards, but slowly, trying to build that structure and the infrastructure that's not there. But we took those routes. So that puts us right now from a city service standpoint of being at about 27% of, service, providing services. So pretty much every week in total, our customer base is 151,000 that we're servicing now. So in building that up and building that out, and it's certainly a portion of that. Then when it comes to, just getting into the contract piece, I know that in Lexington, we owned our transfer station, but we bid out the management of that facility. And then we gained the host fees off of that. But I will tell you that when it came to the destination of our waste, most of those, I'll back up a little bit, we put green initiatives in there. So you can build that contract with some, you can kind of do your scoring methodology where you build incentives in toward green programming and the things that you're wanting to accomplish as a community. So we built that into ours, and so we were able to get green checks, because where ours was going, we got a portion of the funds that they were using when they were plumbing gas, and the gas into the Toyota plant. And so we got a green check just off of that. But typically what they'll do in a contract is they'll tell you all the locations that they have the ability to take your waste. Because that means also that wherever they're taking your waste, you also have that exposure and liability to it too. So ours in Lexington was going 65 miles away, you know. So they can take it, and our cost was about half the cost that it is here. But now they were trying to be really, really competitive, and I think the next contract was a little bit higher. So I think if you kind of get out on the forefront and kind of structure a contract, I think they will be competitive because it is a business. You know, right now, if I were guessing where it might go, your waste is probably going to land in Kentucky somewhere. Just from that standpoint, I'm not sure the mileage on that, but I can tell you Lexington was hauling there 65 miles away at half the cost. So I do think that, you know, there's that side of it. But in terms of the siting and owning a facility, you know, typically when you're looking at that kind of thing, you can co-locate a recycling processing facility and a transfer station. And I've already kind of looked in the Jackson law. That's not something in Kentucky, but I know that those two things are exempt from Jackson law, you know, when it comes to that.
Can you explain to me what that is?
So that's basically, as a community, you all can decide whether you want to expand the landfill capacity and those kinds of things. It's a Tennessee thing.
Jackson law requires a public hearing before you cite anything.
Yeah. But exempt from that is recycling, processing, transfer stations, things like that.
So lots of options. All right, well, we are coming up on an hour, so I don't want to hold people past supper time. But I do want this to be a productive group, and there's clearly a lot of stuff happening out there. We can be cheerleaders, we can advocate on the budget, we can pass legislation, and we can get educated. I would absolutely encourage doing the Compost Nashville tour, and the recycling facility processing tour if you haven't done those. And those are the folks over there that can set that up, because it's great education. I would say I would love for us to learn more about where our current recycling is being processed, because, you know, nobody's gonna make money off of recycling if there's nobody close by that can actually turn it into something useful. And so I think I would love to see that transparency thing happen soon. And if it's possible for us just as a council to say, we want to report on that, I don't know if that's good enough to then make it so that we can work within the current contract that we have. But I feel like the public would feel better served if they knew where it was really going. And I have faith that it is going somewhere. I just would love to be able to tell people that. So that may be our next thing to do. I'll look to y'all for that. We want to work with the department. So just know you got a bunch of cheerleaders here to help y'all do whatever needs doing. So my question to this group is, we have lots of meetings and all that kind of stuff. Do we need to meet every month? Do we need to just be 5 minutes before the infrastructure committee meets? Any thoughts on what we can do to be useful? I mean, there's always good information that we can get. I know. Or we can work on Council Connect, if that's a way to get things done. Thoughts on that?
My thoughts, until we start having more stuff, like more activity, I'm fine with every other month.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I'm open to that changing if we do start having stuff where we do need to meet once a month or twice a month as we're trying to fine tune stuff. But for now, I don't think there's really enough for us to cover to do once a month.
Okay.
I think we all have to get educated on, I guess, what's going on and then what needs to be changed.
How we can help build that infrastructure, yeah.
I wouldn't mind if it was on the same week as a council meeting.
If it was, or what?
It was.
Yeah, me too.
Okay.
I think, yeah, kind of seconding from both of y'all, I think if we have kind of this direction setting, kind of shorter conversations or more general conversations, I think we can definitely, it's been really hard to fit anything on committee days lately because we've, in 2 months, we'll have one non-compressed committee schedule. And that's been really challenging, but it's not normally like that. Normally we can fit more things in. So I think targeting those, unless we have like a massive like contract review or something that we all need to spend 90 minutes
Yeah.
talking through, and then I think it makes sense to do the standalone.
Okay, so like on a Wednesday of a council week or at the same?
Oh, I would say on the Mondays.
On Mondays,
Monday,
okay.
Mondays,
Yeah.
Once we get past this log jam of, I know there's a lot of requests for presentations and stuff that
Okay.
the council office is trying to accommodate and figure out a way to make happen. But
Great.
come March, we should be back on a better footing with
Okay.
the committee days.
Till the budget stuff kicks in. But yes, that's exactly.
That's true. Thankfully, a lot of that happens on
Yeah.
not committee days,
That's true.
not
That's true.
standing
That's
committee
true.
days.
So that's good. So I would say, Director Darby.
I just wanted to point out, if we do start having a subcommittee meeting prior to the council meeting, I think it might be, to the standing committee meeting, I think it might be helpful to have those meetings in here as kind of a quick, roundup. If there is gonna be a presentation, we need to have those earlier in the day so that we can get it queued up, because
okay.
MNN cannot show them that quickly. I don't know what they do in their room back there,
Yeah.
but there's apparently some technical stuff that goes into being able to show the display on the screen.
Okay.
We need a switch out here.
You talk to MNN about that.
That's not, okay.
I'm not a
Okay.
technical person, I just know that we were unable to show tonight's presentation live, so we will hopefully get that emailed
Yes.
to us, and we'll upload it to
That'd be
the
nice.
SharePoint, so you can watch, if you're watching the meeting, you can have it on
Yeah.
a side screen and look into it.
Nothing to be behind us or whatever. That's great. Okay, well then let's plan on, look for Council Connect if there is stuff happening. If we could set up some tours, I'll work with the department, the division on that, and then if there's if there's anything coming up that we can do homework on ahead of time, we'd be more educated, we would love to do that, I think. So it sounds like the low-hanging fruit that we've talked about, did we come up with any action items for anybody other than, feel like we gave y'all a lot of stuff to do?
I mean, requesting a report, I mean, if you might want to talk with the director and the team about, on the recycling, because that is a conversation that happens a lot around recycling. Like, a lot of people are like, well, I heard it doesn't go anywhere, and I heard that this, and some of that is like, there was a lot of, communication about a particular issue, like when the paper thing was happening, and people heard that and they're like, oh, well, it's all getting thrown away, and so what's the point? But
Same thing with plastic bags.
yeah, and I always tell people, aluminum, I promise the aluminum's going somewhere.
Right.
But yeah, if we could just, like, if you want to,
Yeah.
we could
Let's
maybe
chase that
request
one.
that.
Yes. Okay,
Just
good.
getting that, like a
Public
one-pager that I can boil down to just like regular conversation real easy,
Gotcha.
and that would be maybe more than a one-pager if y'all need to, but just something digestible. I guess that's the term I'm looking for, digestible.
Okay, so the food palette, just finding out what it would take to,
I think that is important with budget coming up, yes.
The
So I think-
compost, like, is that what you?
Yeah.
the compost.
Yes, is our grant likely to continue, or what
Or
would
if
it-
not,
what would
what
it
do
take
we
to
need to put in
expand
our
it?
budget to
Yeah.
keep it going? Okay, great, that sounds great. Okay, well, I feel like
Chair.
I've learned a lot. Yes.
Well, I was just gonna say, if you want to tentatively look at, unless we have reason to, my suggestion would be, unless we have reason to do a standalone meeting, to tentatively look to one of the March
Okay.
standing committee days for us to reconvene this
For the next
quote.
meeting, okay.
That's my suggestion, but, whatever we decide is fine as well.
Gotcha. Does that sound good to the rest of the group? We love it, okay.
Timeline works out.
Next meeting in March, okay. All right, that will be announced far enough ahead of time for people to know about it. Great, thank you all for coming out on a non-cancel week. I've learned a ton, this is great, thanks so much for
I
putting
agree.
together the slideshow, and to M&N for doing that. All right, any other thoughts? We are adjourned.